Chapter 17. Escape. The thick, ornate doors closed behind us, and the screams faded. From human ears, at least. Not only could I hear the cries of terror and pain with my ears, but in my mind. Some fought, some begged, some prayed. But one by one, they all perished. Those that weren't fortunate enough to be in the first wave of victims clawed uselessly on the door, earning an anesthetizing blast from Alec. He wasn't worried about them escaping, only about the waste of their blood on the splintered portal, should their skin or fingernails tear. Mixed with the thoughts of the dying were those of the consumers, the superior species. The vampires may consider the humans cattle, but they were no more evolved than animals themselves. Hyenas. No, vultures. They didn't bother to hunt, rather waited for others to procure their prey, leaving them only the task of devouring it. Barbarians. Alice's revulsion was so complete that words could not describe her thoughts. Her dry swallow and locked jaw her only commentary. Overriding the clamor was a single, bone-chilling cry. Bella. Bella continued to spiral into hysteria, her voice echoing the helpless ache and appalling disgust that filled both Alice and me. While others died, she lived, still surrounded by fangless yet lethal creatures. No wonder she was breaking down. I barely heard Dimitri's hurried warning. "Do not leave until dark." We marched through the overly human reception area, adding to the surreal normalcy of this room compared to the gore of the one we had just left. A sappy 70s ballad droned on about sailing to Never Never Land. I led Bella gently, ready to catch her should she faint. She was safe physically, but had I killed her spirit? Had I stolen her soul after all? The curious receptionist's concentrated thoughts joined in my head. "He wears the rank of the upper echelon, but he does not dine with him." Gianna watched Bella stumble past. "She doesn't seem to be able to stomach the requirements for immortality," she thought, with more than a touch of conceit. "And yet she lives." Bella didn't seem to register anything around us. The sound issuing from her vibrating lips got louder and shriller, like a teapot coming to a boil. Her vacant eyes scared me the most. She had receded into the safety of her impenetrable mind, leaving me alone. Helpless to do anything else, I asked, "Are you all right?" but got no response. She stared at the doors we had just passed through, tears streaming down her cheeks, each sweet drop a lance through my heart. "You'd better make her sit down before she falls. She's going to pieces," Alice said. "We can't leave yet," she thought, correctly reading my desire to whisk Bella away from this horrific underworld. Bella's eyes darted around, settling on Alice for only a second before returning to the doors. I guided her to the couch across the room, trying to comfort her with a quiet shushing. She wouldn't calm, and her wails broke into screeching sobs. "I think she's having hysterics," Alice gasped. "Maybe you should slap her." I gaped at her. Strike Bella? My fingers curled in on themselves, ready to lash out. Not at Bella, but at anyone who would want to injure her, including the wisp of a girl standing before me. Alice's eyebrow arched ever so slightly, as Bella sucked in a halting breath. "Relax. It was only a suggestion. Sometimes only words are necessary," she thought smugly. Apparently, the mention of violence had been enough to shock Bella back into coherency. That didn't stop me from wanting to slap Alice. Bella turned her empty gaze on me, then blinked rapidly, like she was waking from a hypnotic trance. The uncontrolled sobs became a more defined sorrow, quieter, but more pained, guilty, regretful. I pulled Bella into my lap, automatically chanting, "It's all right. You're safe." I arranged the cloak so her gossamer skin was protected from my inhuman touch. I wanted to tell her not to worry, that we'd find a way to keep her mortal. She was invisible to the Volturi. I could make her safe. But too many heartless ears were listening. "It's all right. You're safe, Bella," I repeated. With a hiccup, the sobbing stopped, but the tears continued to flow. Alice touched my shoulder. "It's working." She turned her attention to Jasper, breathing a sigh of relief when she saw him promise Carlyle that he'd wait a few more hours before heading to Italy himself. "We'll be home soon," she thought to him more than me. Bella took a trembling breath, and the shaking diminished. Even through the thick wool, I could feel her heat surrounding me, putting my memory to shame. How many endless days had I dreamt of holding her, my hands aching to touch her one more time. Sitting here, in this hellacious prison, I held in my arms the source of an all-consuming inferno, the likes of which Dante never imagined. Her delicious scent incinerating me from the inside out, and yet I never wanted to let her go. "It's all right. You're safe. It's going to be okay." Over and over, I chanted the words, willing her to believe me, wanting to believe them myself. But as she continued to cry, the truth was apparent. She had finally grasped what kind of monsters we truly were. How would I live through losing her again? Her breathing slowly returned to an even rhythm, and I expected her to shy away from my frigid touch. She didn't. "All those people," she croaked into the black fabric. I know. I wanted to tell her that we weren't all like that we could never ever do anything so brutal. But the ever-present fire in my throat betrayed the lie. Bella had heard enough lies from me. "It's so horrible," she said, her voice trembling along with the rest of her. I waited a heartbeat for the amendment, "You're so horrible." But it didn't come, and a familiar yearning filled me. But did I really want to know what she was thinking? Ever cognizant of her tenuous mental state, I replied, "Yes, it is. I wish you hadn't had to see that." I wish so many things. Amidst the regret, amidst Bella's impending dismissal, my greatest wish had been fulfilled. My angel, my fragile, clumsy, beautiful angel, had been resurrected, literally rising from the grave in order to save me. Could I dare make another wish? Or would fate twist it into a curse wrapped in a black cloak? A particularly pained scream came from the feeding. Jane had found a victim with long, dark hair resembling Bella's, and was exercising her own frustrations on the ill-fated woman. Thankfully, Bella couldn't hear the screech, or Jane's sadistic cackle. "Brutes," Alice hissed, only to me. "And they call themselves civilized." With one last deep, shuddering breath, Bella rested her head against me. She scrubbed the tears from her cheeks with the charcoal reminder I was forced to wear, and seemed to relax. I thought the worst had passed. Then Gianna decided to help. "Is there anything I can get you?" the receptionist asked. Her intentions were rooted in genuine concern, though she didn't want to miss an opportunity to impress me, should I turn out to be someone of importance to the Volturi hierarchy. Bella lifted her face to stare at the woman. her expression a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "No," I snapped, angry that she had caused even an inch of separation between Bella and me. Gianna didn't flinch, accustomed to the volatility of the vampires. She gave me an understanding smile and walked back to her post, ready to return should I give her the slightest indication I required her assistance. Bella watched her leave. When Gianna had circled around her desk, Bella whispered, "Does she know what's going on here?" I didn't miss the accusation in her tone. "Yes, she knows everything. And she wants what you want, what you wanted." A vindictive sneer curled Bella's tight lips. "Does she know they're going to kill her someday?" "She knows it's a possibility," I said carefully. Her violent expression vanished, and Bella's eyes grew wide with obvious astonishment. "She's hoping they'll decide to keep her," I explained. Bella paled. "She wants to be one of them?" I nodded, my guilt shrouded in the rise of joy at her use of the third person. As abhorred as Bella was, she didn't group me in with the killers feasting yards away. Her whisper barely rose above the anonymous Muska. "How can she want that? How can she watch those people file through to that hideous room and want to be a part of that?" Had she forgotten everything I told her? We all wanted to be part of that. The lust for human blood was as much a part of me as a finger or my skin. I just wanted other things more. At a loss for words, my eyes were drawn to her pink lips. "Oh, Edward," she wailed, her sobs louder than before. But instead of pushing me away, she drew her face into my chest. Hesitantly, I rubbed her back. If she was scared of me, why was she clinging to me? "What's wrong?" I asked. Much to my surprise and pleasure, she pressed herself even harder against me, wrapping her arms around me in a stranglehold. Bella's tears were liquid fire on my neck, dripping down the folds of the fabric onto my bare chest. "Is it really sick of me to be happy right now?" she whispered. Automatically, I tightened my grip around her, squeezing her as tightly as I dared, my love too exuberant for words. Woven into her words, her grasp, her tears, was one truth. She still loved me. Not even the moment she had fallen into my arms beneath the clock tower was so sweet. For now I knew she was alive, not some cheap imitation I had conjured in my mind, and that her actions had not been rooted in selflessness, but in the affection she still felt for me in her heart. Everything I ever wanted, everything that I had been foolish enough to leave behind, sat in my arms, safe, protected. The sounds of death and torture were erased by the shuddering pounding of her heart as it beat life into mine. After all the tribulations, all the fear, the horror, the death, my Bella, my fragile piece of heaven, wanted permission to be happy. The last victim surrendered his life's blood with only a defeated whimper, reminding me that this place was hardly one to inspire joy. And yet, that's all I could feel. "I know exactly what you mean," I whispered, easing my grip just enough for her to lay her head against my chest and breathe. "But we have lots of reasons to be happy. For one, we're alive. You're alive." "Yeah, that's a good one." Her voice seeped into me like a balm, filling me with so much love that I could only whisper, "And together." Nothing could make me any happier. She nodded in agreement, and while my heart rejoiced, that little warning voice in my head wondered if I had said something wrong. I tried to buoy her spirit. And with any luck, we'll still be alive tomorrow. Hopefully, she said, disbelief permeating the word. Alice immediately caught Bella's tone. The outlook is quite good. She concentrated on Aro, and saw him sending Alec out to release us, after the last remnants of the carnage had been eradicated. Looking further ahead, she was greeted by the love-filled eyes of her mate. A brief snapshot of me laying with the sleeping Bella ended Alice's foray into the future. I'll see Jasper in less than 24 hours, she said. It's really over. Bella's frown surprised me. Had she lost her faith in Alice's visions? Or was it the prospect of seeing Jasper again that caused her worry? She had been adamant about holding him blameless months ago. Had she recanted her forgiveness? I touched the purple beneath her eyes, another sign of her physical frailty. Exhaustion was clearly taking its toll on my love. Perhaps it was disguising her responses as well. You look so tired, I said. And you look thirsty, she responded, noting my own ebony eyes. Her worry faded into selfless concern, and I had to repress a groan. My Bella always found a way to put herself last. Could she understand how little my thirst affected me now? I could stand in a vat of blood if it meant keeping her safe. It's nothing. Are you sure? I could sit with Alice, she said without enthusiasm. Her hand tightened around a fistful of cloak, and I took perverse pleasure in her lie. Don't be ridiculous. Bella's eyes unfocused as I exhaled. At first I worried she might be upset again, but then her heart skipped a beat. I half expected my heart to make up for the missing pulse when I realized I had dazzled her, that I still could. I've never been in better control of that side of my nature than right now. The other side of my nature yearned for me to open my cloak a little further so she could cool her cheek against my bare skin. Controlling that urge took much more effort than a simple swallow. Bella recovered from my inadvertent distraction. Her brow creased, and she started to say something. But after a quick glance toward the receptionist, she abruptly pressed her lips tightly together. A plethora of emotions paraded through her eyes. Anger, fear, desperation, all of which faded with a cautious sigh. We had many things to discuss, not the least of which was the long overdue apology I owed her. But this wasn't the place. Not while we were still captive. But soon. While Bella stared up at me, I detailed every minute change in her appearance. In the months I had been gone, she had continued aging, looking more mature than her 18.5 years. The hollows in her cheeks, the prominence of her chin, all things I had attributed to her being a specter, spoke of the difficult time she had during my absence. Her thin hair was half a shade lighter and stood stiffly off her scalp. The purple under her eyes ran deeper than that caused by just a single night's loss of sleep. I guessed that it rivaled the rings under my own. I slid my hand under her fist, and she concentrated her hold around my fingers. The startling definition of the bones in her hand and wrist made my empty stomach knot painfully. As insubstantial as she was before I had left, I didn't need a scale to tell me she had lost a little over 9 pounds, and this was after she had begun her recovery. I deserved to be flayed alive for what I had done to her. Alice interrupted my guilty thoughts. So you ran all the way from Rome? I don't think that's the best way to get home. She spoke quickly, keenly aware of the nosy human at the desk across the room. "What would you suggest?" Bella's gaze drifted to my lips as I spoke, but she didn't seem to comprehend what I said.
"We came in through Florence, but didn't have any time to really see the sights. The drive was fantastic, though."
She giggled, hoping to find an equally responsive automobile to get us home. "You did get lucky with the car. We'll need one with 4 real seats this trip."
"She could sit in your lap,"
she smirked.
"At least I'd get to drive. If we can find a fast enough car, we'll make it to Florence in time."
Bella's eyes sparkled as she glanced at Alice, and earned a wink from my sister. Her gaze didn't linger, though, and returned to inspect my hair.
"She really is something, Edward. She came after you without a second's hesitation."
Alice didn't mean for the thought to continue, but I caught the gist. Bella wouldn't have left Italy alive if I had succeeded. I swore I'd never put her in that position ever again. Alice moved on, picturing Florence and mentally ticking off names like Prada, Armani, and Versace like she was calling roll. "In time for what, Alice?" I asked, afraid of the answer.
"Just a little shopping. This is my first time in Italy, you know. Gucci, Ferragamo, Luisa."
The list went on. "Bella's not going to be in any shape for an extended expedition. There are people waiting for us to get home," I said quietly. "Only a few would be happy to see me. Charlie definitely wouldn't be one of them." Alice nodded, knowing how anxious Jasper was. Bella repositioned her hand so it was resting over my heart, and I bent down and kissed her hair. Strawberries. She was still using the same shampoo. I covered her hand with mine, and after a second, she spread her fingers so mine could mingle between hers. She didn't look up until Alice spoke.
"What was all that talk about singers?"
Alice asked. Bella perked up when I explained how she was what Aro called la tua cantante. Alice laughed.
"How appropriate. She's your singer, you're her music."
Her blood might sing, but it was just one refrain in the symphony that was Bella. Alice's musings continued, and she not so subtly worked her way back to spending time and money in the Florence fashion district. "What about Charlie?" I asked, making sure Bella couldn't hear me. "He's got to be beside himself." I didn't speculate what kind of reception he would give me. I could only hope that the bulk of his anger would fall on my shoulders and not Bella's. Seeing a harried Charlie cross another phone number off a long list of Los Angeles area hospitals, Alice adjusted her plans.
"You're right. Maybe Jasper will bring me back for my birthday."
Too many decisions clouded her future to be sure what he might give her. She gave me a wry smile.
"January 28th. Mark your calendar."
"You've been busy, I see," I said, catching the highlights of her trip to Mississippi. Alice hadn't learned much of her past, but as she told me what little she had found, she looked at Bella.
"If it hadn't been for her, I would have never known."
Rather than relive those macabre moments in Phoenix, I kissed Bella's forehead. She didn't move, but her fragrant blush bloomed, warming my cheeks as well as hers. I longed to kiss her lips and feel her fingers knot in my hair, bask in her unrestrained passion, even if I couldn't return it. Her heart suggested that the desire still lurked within her, but she neither encouraged me to kiss her nor dissuaded me. Perhaps it was this place, or sheer fatigue, that influenced her. That would explain why she only managed a tight-lipped smile when I leaned back. Alice continued to catch me up on the goings-on that I had missed. She tried to keep the conversation light, but when memories of Carlyle's remorse or Esme's melancholy crept in, I'd kiss Bella, knowing I inflicted even more pain on her. Catatonic. As with everything else, I underestimated her capacity for grief. I touched my lips to the tip of her nose, wishing that something as simple as a kiss could erase all the mistakes, all the turmoil I had caused. Maybe that was what kept Bella so quiet. I hadn't even asked for her, yet alone been granted her forgiveness.
Finally,
Alice thought. Aro had decided it was dark enough to release us. She also caught the result of another decision he had made. Gianna wouldn't be getting the promotion she had hoped. I tightened my grip on Bella. If not for Bella's uniquely shielded mind, he would have condemned her and me just as fast. As expected, Alec was chosen to bring us the news. He stopped to instruct Dmitri before coming to release us. "If they give you any trouble, you may deal with them as you see fit," he said, in the same tone I would have used to read a stock quote. Our fate was of little interest to him. He entered the reception area with a polite smile on his face. An able Cheshire cat to Jane's evil Queen of Hearts, Alec oozed the same sugary, patronizing charm as a used car salesman. If he had been trying to endear himself to anyone, he failed miserably. Bella buried herself even more deeply in the folds of the cloak under his gaze, her fingers trembling again. Alec ignored her. "You're free to leave now. We ask that you don't linger in the city." His true, lethal disposition was evident in his blood-red eyes. "That won't be a problem," I said, not bothering to veil what I thought of his attempt at civility. Arrogant to the end, Alec thought, before stalking off. Bella took a halting breath as I helped her up, the color returning to her cheeks once the door closed behind Alec. Gianna seized her final opportunity to assert herself again, seeing our dismissal as a possible opening for her.
"Follow the right hallway around the corner to the first set of elevators. The lobby is 2 floors down, and exits to the street. Goodbye now."
Alice caught my frown and followed my gaze.
"Goodbye, indeed."
She gave the receptionist a cold glare, knowing that the girl's fate was sealed and earned. Gianna had helped facilitate the deaths of hundreds in order to earn immortality for herself, and received no sympathy from my sister. Bella's forehead creased as we passed, comparing herself to the wannabe vampire I surmised. Gianna was prepared to do anything to get what she wanted. Was Bella? What did she want? Anticipating freedom, Bella straightened up when the elevator doors opened on the ground floor. The glow of the fleeting twilight shone through the glass entry doors, and her gait quickened. Once outside, she stumbled when she looked back over her shoulder at the fortress. If she was expecting someone to follow us, she was looking in the wrong direction. They lurked above, flitting from rooftop to rooftop, black shadows in the darkening sky.
"I'll meet you at the gate,"
Alice thought, outlining her plan to gather hers and Bella's things. I glanced towards the roofline and raised an eyebrow.
"Thanks. I'll be careful."
She smiled brilliantly, then ducked between the buildings.
"I'll only be a moment, Felix,"
she said, hearing Dmitri order the hulking vampire to follow her. "Why do I always get stuck with the little ones?" he mumbled to himself. "I can squash her like a bug." "Ridiculous," I groaned.
ignoring a drunken greeting from one of the human revelers. If Felix had ever seen Alex play tag with Jasper, he might understand how formidable she was. He'd be lucky to lay a finger on her before losing his head. We continued to negotiate our way through the costumed crowd. With everyone dressed alike, the humans' natural aversions were dampened. Several smiled with their fake plastic fangs and began to compliment me on my cape and pale complexion before they realized there was more to me than makeup.
"Non si,"
one woman started, then cowered under my sneer.
"Terrible."
Above me, Dmitri snickered. "I don't think you're so terrible." Bella suddenly tightened her grip around my waist, making me wonder again if there wasn't something extrasensory about her perception. But it wasn't Dmitri she had noticed.
"Where's Alice?"
She rose to her toes to try to see over the crowd, her head swiveling around wildly. I touched my lips to her hair before answering. "She went to retrieve your bags where she had stashed them this morning." Bella took a deep breath and blew it and her panic out with a whoosh. Lavender and freesia swirled around me, laced with the luscious fragrance of her blood. The burn didn't seem as intense, nor was it any trouble to ignore. Having lost her once, I knew I'd never thirst for her in the same way ever again. When she looked up at me again, I saw a glimmer of the untroubled Bella I had no right to call mine. Her lips softened, and she almost smiled.
"She's stealing a car, too, isn't she?"
she said, her voice lowered conspiratorially. This from the girl who reminded me on more than one occasion that she was the police chief's daughter. I nearly laughed out loud. "Not till we're outside." I couldn't help but beam at her. She was safe, and I'd have her all to myself for at least the next 12 hours. Not a fantasy, not a memory, but my real, human, perfect Bella. Only a few more blocks, and we'd be truly free. Bella stumbled again. Her eyes locked on mine, and I repositioned my arm so that I could easily lift her feathery frame, should she even hint at tripping. Half carrying her, we made better time, reaching the opening of the city wall as Alice pulled up in a black Audi. Walking under the portcullis, Bella looked up and shivered, making me wonder what had bothered her. Our escorts had leapt to street level and lingered at the fringes of the crowd, so there was nothing threatening above us. The wooden spikes would be no match for me. Surely she knew that. "I'll be seeing you," Dmitri said softly, re-establishing my mental fingerprint in his mind. He might be able to find me, but I couldn't find any evidence of Bella's existence in his thoughts. I hid my smirk as I helped Bella into the car. Before I got in the opposite side, I shot Dmitri a malignant glare. "And we'll see you coming," I wanted to say, but even I wasn't so arrogant as to provoke him this close to liberation. Without a word, I opened the door behind Alice and sat next to a stunned Bella. She did a double-take between me and Alice, then slid under the arm I offered. At first her reaction confused me, but then I realized that we rarely shared a back seat together. The irony of the fact wasn't lost on me. Teenagers, especially teenage boys, considered the back seat of a car their playground, and while I wasn't such a base creature, I had to admit that being able to focus all my attention on Bella was quite pleasing.
"I'm sorry, there wasn't much to choose from,"
Alice said, her eyes smiling at me in the mirrors.
"Didn't you almost get Carlisle in A8?
I did, until I saw the AMG version of the Mercedes. The idea of acquiring an Audi hadn't totally left me, though, and sitting in one reminded me of how much I liked this car. It wasn't like I couldn't afford both. I glanced down at Bella. Her ancient truck couldn't last much longer. Whipping through the curves, Alice groaned. Even with its precise German construction, the car couldn't take the corners at near triple digits like her previous vehicle.
"We had a great trip up,"
she thought, and I was rewarded with an image of the dash and bumblebee-colored scheme of the Porsche she had stolen. I smothered a chuckle. She'd put any professional car thief to shame. "It's fine, Alice. They can't all be 911 turbos."
"I may have to acquire one of those legally. It was fabulous. Even Bella liked it."
She showed me my love's face, surrounded by black leather, with the scenery a blur out of the window next to her. Every time Alice had touched the brakes on the way to Voltura, Bella had leaned forward, silently willing the car to speed up. "I'll get you one for Christmas." It was the least I could do, and maybe an A4 or a TT for Bella. With a huge grin, she said,
"Yellow."
Of course. Subtlety had never been Alice's forte. As she listened to our quick banter, Bella reclined against me. Her head rested on my shoulder, her hair falling across her eyes as she stared out of the window. "You can sleep now, Bella. It's over," I said softly. I brushed the hair back, unwilling to have my view of her face obstructed, even as she slept. She swallowed loudly and pulled herself up straight.
"I don't want to sleep. I'm not tired."
Another fabrication. Was she lying to me or herself? "Try," I said, blowing the word toward her. Only sheer will was keeping her from sleep. Why? I kissed a particularly sweet spot below her ear, ostensibly to encourage her eyes to close, I told myself, but enjoying the tingling shiver we shared just the same. Bella's eyelids fluttered, but she shook off the urge to close them completely. "You're still just as stubborn," I sighed, trying one last time to coerce her into slumber. But she refused to be dazzled this time, nor did she offer an explanation. My curiosity was lost in the incoherent plea for understanding in her shadowed eyes. I couldn't argue further. I was certain that if I started humming, she wouldn't be able to stay awake. But I didn't. Maybe she'd give in and rest on the plane. She deserved the peace that sleep brought. I didn't help her stay awake, though, silently rubbing her arm or back. Alice was our only audience, and she busied herself mentally humming a police anthology that she knew I particularly liked. Bella split her attention between me and the road ahead, switching when she felt her head drooping. It was as much privacy as we could ask for, and yet I remained quiet. For a while, I waited for Bella to speak, to try to get a bead on where her thoughts lie. Eventually, I admitted my selfishness. Bella seemed content to be with me now. Any apology I attempted would only serve to remind her how I had not only broken her heart, but put her in mortal danger. Even if her silence was evidence of her justified distrust, her unmistakable grip on me proved she found some comfort in my presence. So I maintained the silence, finding much more than comfort in her arms. With a sigh, Alice reluctantly slowed and merged with the stream of cars heading into Florence. At first, I thought the creeping traffic was the cause of her irritation, but I should have known better.
"Only Milan beats Florence for fashion,"
she thought wistfully. She checked the clock on the dash, and the car lurched forward.
"We might still make it."
I'd been too immersed in Bella's movements to see what Alice was planning, and why the driver's choice to run the light ahead of us made any difference. With a sharp jerk, she followed the car through the intersection, weaving between cross-traffic. "Alice," I warned. Bella hadn't seen the near miss, thankfully.
"You know what they say, Edward. No shirt, no shoes, no service. We only have about 10 minutes until the stores close anyway.
She paused, needing only a tenth of a second to check our schedule.
Yes!
Bella remained silent during our quick exchange, stretching a little when we stopped in front of a row of shuttered clothing shops. A few tourists wandered the streets. Only one store across the way still glowed brightly. "I have shoes," I reminded Alice, as she dashed out of the car.
Since when does that matter? You're just lucky Etestani is closed already.
She met the shopkeeper at the door, and with a wave of her credit card, was escorted in. Bella rubbed her eyes and tried to hide a yawn.
"What Alice wants, Alice gets," she said.
I chuckled and loosened my hold on her, giving her yet another chance to separate herself from me, while hoping she wouldn't move an inch. Thankfully, she's also fast. Inside the store, Alice already had 2 outfits picked out and draped over the woman's arm. Bella heaved a sigh and frowned. Something I had said upset her, again. But what? I couldn't believe she wanted to shop with Alice. She shifted, but didn't let any space come between us, contradicting her distress. I stroked her hair, and she turned her face so my palm brushed her cheek with each pass. At least my touch pleased her, if my words didn't. In record time, Alice had completed the transaction and stood at the door of the shop waiting.
"Grab your bags. We'll take a taxi from here."
She had seen that our car had already been reported as stolen and would attract undue attention under the bright lights and security cameras at the airport. "Bella, we're going to leave the car here and take a cab to the airport. Alice can arrange for you to change and use the restroom if you'd like." She didn't move at first, then took a deep breath and slid away from me.
"I'd like that, actually."
Her lips bulged as she swept her tongue across her teeth. With a scowl, she reached over the front seat and grabbed her backpack. I escorted Bella across the street. The owner invited us in and locked the door behind us.
"Questo senso, signor."
She motioned to the back, eyeing my cloak and correctly guessing where I'd been. "Grazie," I replied. Alice wrapped an arm around Bella, stealing her away from me.
"Here you go, Bella. I removed all the tags. Your outfit is ready to wear."
She paused next to the curtain.
"Your clothes are in there, Edward. We'll just be a minute."
I kissed Bella's cheek and prepared myself to let her out of my sight. "I'll be back in a flash." Bella nodded, but her knuckles were white as she squeezed her hands together. Slowly, she let Alice lead her to the back of the store.
"I brought clothes to change into,"
she tried to argue.
"Sweats don't constitute clothes, Bella,"
Alice chastised. I changed, then calculated the value of E to the 300th decimal place. The owner still raised an eyebrow when I emerged from the dressing room so soon, but I was past the point of caring.
"Much better,"
Alice said, eyeing my new shirt and slacks. She had my new jacket draped over her arm.
"Can we get rid of that?"
Meaning the cloak bunched in my hand. "I'll take care of it. The car?" Alice giggled.
"I'll be back in a flash,"
she said, mimicking me just a little too well.
"Meet you outside."
I didn't answer, seeing Bella stride toward me with a decisive clip in her step. She tugged at the hem of her new sea-green blouse. It fit perfectly, of course, emphasizing her maturity and beauty. The sight rendered me speechless. I took the backpack from Bella and offered her my arm. "Shall we?" I said hoarsely. Carefully, she looped her hand under my elbow and nodded again, with a little more enthusiasm this time, but didn't smile. That was the one thing that I was waiting for. Her smile. Even though she clung to me and seemed to relish my touch, there was always a tentativeness, an uncertainty with every motion. She wanted to be with me, but was scared too. Or was it something else? Until she told me, I wouldn't know. We exited the shop and met Alice on the sidewalk. She raised her arm, but the first cab didn't slow.
The second taxi will stop,
she thought, seeing a white car screech to a halt and deposit its passengers right in front of us. She envisioned a different, dark-haired woman stepping out of the car and recognizing me.
Who is she?
Alice wondered. Noting the empty alley next to us, I hastily pulled my arm from Bella's grip. I'm going to dispose of this. I'll just be a minute. Bella looked at me curiously.
Okay.
The car door opened as I sped off, ducking into the nearby alley. I dumped the Volturi uniform into the garbage and flattened myself into the shadows. The woman and her friend emerged from the taxi and started toward the shop we had just left. The lights winked off as she reached for the door.
Darn, they just closed.
The first woman's voice wasn't one I knew.
Oh well, maybe we can find a cafe in the piazza. I can't believe the deal you got on that purse.
Her companion's Texas twang was unmistakable, though.
I know. I should have bought 4 or 5 more to sell them back home.
Marcy, the woman who had sat next to me on the flight from Rio, was alive and well, and sporting a new handbag.
Coffee sounds good. We can plan our schedule for tomorrow. David can't wait any longer,
she said with mock seriousness. Her mind embellished the image she had seen in the brochure on the plane, and then she remembered me.
I hope he's doing better,
she thought briefly.
Perfect,
was her companion's eager reply. The two strolled down the street, discussing the pluses and minuses of men made of stone. Neither noticed me as they crossed the mouth of the alley. Shutting out their lewd thoughts, I joined Bella in the taxi. She looked up at me with a relieved sigh and inspected the smile I gave her. I lifted her hand, watching her face as I caressed her palm with my lips. Her pulse raced and her breathing hitched, just like it always had, but no smile accompanied the reaction. After warning the driver in flawless Italian to take the most direct route to the airport, Alice looked back over her shoulder and saw the worry creased in my brow when Bella settled against my shoulder.
She's exhausted, Edward. Once she gets some sleep, she'll be back to normal.
She showed me the smile I was searching for, glowing up at me in the moonlight. I forced a grin at her, by way of thank you. We passed the women I had hidden from, and Alice looked at me again.
You knew her, didn't you?
She reviewed the visions she had had of me, flinching again at the number of times she had seen me die. When the flyer for Voltura appeared in Marcy's hand, she smiled.
I think you saved her life.
Alice had seen how my future unfolded based on that conversation, not the humans. I shrugged, but couldn't help feel like I had scored another victory over the Volturi. Even though another had taken her place, Marcy lived, and would return to her family, safe and sound, just like Bella.